Every year in fantasy, we look back and think, man, how did I not draft that guy? How did I not see that big season coming? If I would have drafted him, my team would have been so much better. Well, not this year, because I'm going to give you 4 players that are being severely undervalued this year that have a chance to be guys we look back on and think, how did we miss on them? Hey, before I get to that, I got to remind you, flockfantasy.com/endgame is where you need to be this fantasy football season. Not only can you play redraft fantasy football with and against Pierre and myself, you're also going to have a chance to win cash prizes, money to first place, money to second place, no buy-in for our members. Also, as an added bonus, one of us will break down your fantasy teams. You can send it to us. We will break them down just for you, let you know what we like, what we don't like, what we changed, things you could do just for our flockfantasy.com/endgame members. If you use promo code endgame, not to mention you're going to get access to our bonus articles, bonus videos, rankings, everything you need to dominate this fantasy football season. Flockfantasy.com/endgame, 30% off if you subscribe today. All right, let's start off with a quarterback, and I think one of my favorite late round quarterbacks, other than Anthony Richardson, who I've talked about a ton, is Dak Prescott. This is a guy who's been nothing but great in fantasy football so far, and last year was also pretty good. I wouldn't say he was great, but he was pretty good. In over half of his healthy games last year, he finished as a QB1 and had over 20 fantasy points. And look, I expect more from my QB1. I kind of just look at like 20 fantasy points as kind of the baseline for my QB1. I know no quarterback or very few quarterbacks do that week in and week out, but you want that to be around like 75, 80%. He wasn't quite there, but there are reasons to think he will get there this year. Number one, switching from this Kellen Moore offense to the Mike McCarthy offense is going to be so good for Dak Prescott. I keep talking about it, but nobody's listening. This is going to be more of a West Coast offense. Last year, it was more of a deep ball offense. He ranked 10th in air yards per attempt last year, which is good because it means, he's racking up tons of yards, but it's also bad because it means he's throwing the ball deeper into coverage, more chances for interceptions. And we saw him have one of the highest interception rates, not one of the, by far the highest interception rate of his entire career at 3.8%. Typically over his career, he's been around that 1.5 to 1.8% range every single year. We should feel good about him going back to that number because the Mike McCarthy system is more of a West Coast system. It's more about timing, getting the receivers the ball in space, quick, accurate passes, easy throws, and letting the playmakers make plays for Dak Prescott. So we should see his interception numbers come way down, but we shouldn't expect any drop in efficiency or yards because he's got guys like CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, a fully healthy Michael Gallup. He's got playmakers around him that can make plays. And last year, despite only playing basically 10 games, he still had 25 touchdowns. That's 2.5 touchdowns per game. This is a guy who can get mid 30 touchdowns, well over 4,000 yards. And if those interception numbers come down, he's going to have a great season. And he's typically being drafted as one of the latest QBs in your 1 QB league. QB 10, QB 11, sometimes even QB 12, sometimes even Daniel Jones is going over him. What are we doing, people? Dak Prescott is a great real-life quarterback, a great fantasy quarterback. He's one of the best late-round quarterback values out there. If you miss out on one of those early QBs and you got to wait, happily take Dak Prescott. Now at tight end, I really like Pat Friermuth. I've talked about him a bunch this year, and I'm going to keep talking about him. He had 98 targets last year, also had 63 receptions and 732 yards, but he only scored 2 touchdowns, and that really hurt his ceiling. But he still finished as a tight end 6, and had he scored 7 touchdowns like he did as a rookie, he would have finished as a tight end 5, only 3 points behind George Kittle, who had 11 touchdowns. Pat Friermuth is one of the safest, highest floor tight ends you can have, which isn't a bad thing to have at the tight end position because there's not a lot of ceiling guys at tight end. There's basically Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, maybe George Kittle a few times a year, maybe Kyle Pitts if he actually breaks out. That's basically all the ceiling guys. He gives you a nice high floor. And I talked about it in the overvalued video. George Pickens' role is basically just run deep, which is going to open up things for Friermuth even more. They also drafted a rookie tight end who's a very good run blocking tight end, which means Pat Friermuth probably won't be asked to do much run blocking, which is good because it means when he's out there, he's running routes and catching passes. This is a guy in your PPR league you can draft late in your drafts, typically going as a tight end 10, and he's just a set and forget tight end every single week. And if he rebounds in touchdowns, which he definitely could, he's going to have a great year this year, and everybody who drafted him is going to feel so good that they waited and got him. So for me, Friermuth, severely undervalued right now. It may be crazy to call the RB5 undervalued. A guy going in the second round, calling him undervalued. Like, well, how could he be undervalued? But Jonathan Taylor is undervalued this year. He just is. Rookie year, finishes the RB6. Year 2, destroyed fantasy football, the RB1. Last year, year 3, certainly a down year, but also this guy dealt with ankle and foot injuries pretty much all year long. It's hard to play through those things. So obviously we should have expected that his efficiency dropped. Now he's coming into this year, should be fully healthy. He's still a young, elite, generational talent type of running back, and he's in a great situation because rookie quarterback Anthony Richardson, who I like and who I know a lot of people are worried about, thinking he's going to run and vulture all kinds of touchdowns. This is going to be an offense that runs the ball a lot, and they can't run it with Anthony Richardson 25 times a game. He's going to die. They're going to lean on Jonathan Taylor and this running game, and Anthony Richardson is just going to make his job easier because now teams have to worry about this dual threat. Is he giving the ball to Jonathan Taylor or is he keeping it himself? Look at other rushing quarterbacks. J.K. Dobbins has been hyper efficient with Lamar Jackson. Miles Sanders has been incredibly efficient with Jalen Hurts. It helps the running back when teams don't know who's getting the ball, and they have to worry about both of these guys. I'm not worried about the touchdown vulture. Jonathan Taylor's touchdown rate last year was so ridiculously low that the law of averages basically say he has to score more touchdowns simply by default. He's going to be a workhorse running back. Like I said, he's in the prime of his career. He has incredible explosion. He can always hit on the big plays. He's an incredible talent. RB5 in the second round is just ridiculous to me for a guy who last year was the consensus #1 pick, or at least a top 2 pick in fantasy drafts. He's going to bounce back in a massive way this year. Take the value. And then finally, a receiver I've been starting to talk about a bit more is Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown of the Cardinals. This is a guy last year before his foot injury in week 6 was the wide receiver 5. That was with Kyler Murray, no DeAndre Hopkins, a terrible offense, and a terrible defense, which is basically exactly what they're going to have this year because people are worried that Kyler Murray isn't going to even play this year. Like the Cardinals are just going to bench him for the whole year, even if he's healthy, just so they can have the #1 pick. That isn't how it works in the NFL. When Kyler Murray is ready, he's going to play. They're paying him $1 zillion. He's by far their best option. And I really think we're going to see him within the first 3 or 4 weeks, if not week 1, because again, he's going to have a full 9 to 10 months to recover here. It was a clean ACL tear. We've seen many quarterbacks come back. We've seen quarterbacks come back even sooner than that. And if Kyler Murray is limited in his mobility early in the year, which he probably will be, that means he's a pocket passer. And that means he's just going to pepper Marquise Brown with targets. Because who is he competing with here? Like Rondell Moore, Greg Dortch, Trey McBride. There's no competition for targets here. And again, just like last year, it was a bad offense. It was a bad defense. There was no DeAndre Hopkins, and Marquise Brown was breaking fantasy football, and he was going to smash if he had stayed healthy, and Kyler Murray had stayed healthy, and likely would have helped many teams win fantasy championships, and I think he does it this year. And even if Kyler Murray's not back until week 4, you're telling me you can't survive 4 weeks without Marquise Brown, who's probably going to be your wide receiver 3? Like, you can't go 2-2. Even 1-3 in 4 weeks is fine. There's plenty of time to rebound. People put so much weight on the early weeks, and they hardly even matter. Marquise Brown could be playing the best football of his career, of the season, when it matters most, down the stretch, as Kyler Murray gets healthier, as the offense gets better. The defense will be terrible. They're going to have to throw it a ton. Marquise Brown is going to be a surprise this year that nobody saw coming because everybody just assumes, don't draft him. Kyler Murray's not playing this year. He's on my do not draft list, which is absolutely absurd. Once we start hearing in training camp that Kyler Murray's going to be playing, everybody's going to be changing their tune. By then, it'll be too late because you've already drafted them. All right, so those are 4 players I think are undervalued right now. But if you want to see some overvalued players, check them out right here.